spending your Thursday evening with us. We cannot just thank you enough. We've had so many wonderful streams this week, and we have plenty more coming up next week as well. You guys have just been a wonderful audience. My name is McKaylee. I work with Tattered Bookstore, and I'm sure that if this is you've seen multiple live streams with us. This is not your first time seeing me, but if it's your first one with us, welcome. Thank you again for joining us. This is a huge part of our business of being able to host author events. And Tattered Cover really thinks of themselves as a community space. And the fact that we cannot physically be together right now is rather difficult for us and for our community. But the fact that we're getting to have be virtually together and be an online community, that means all the world. And we couldn't do that without you guys, and we couldn't do that without your support. And also without your support, we would not be able to be open right now. So for those of you who may be joining us, if you may not live in Colorado or the Denver metro area, Tattered Cover is located in Denver, Colorado. We have 4 locations around the area, and all of them are open right now, which is a huge deal. And we're still grateful for that. And thank you again for your continued support that we're actually able to be open. So you can come in and visit us during our designated hours, as long as you wear your mask over your mouth and your nose, and you can come visit us for about 90 minutes or so and shop. If you want to stay in your pajamas and stay in your house, totally understandable. And you can still shop with us online 24/7 at tatteredcover.com. And we really just cannot thank you guys enough for the continued support over the years. Tattered Cover actually turns 50 in 2021. And it's because of your support that we're able to continue to serve the community in multiple ways, including author events like this one. And so we just want to say thank you, and I'm really excited because this is a really special local event, and it's going to be really fun and interesting, and I can't wait to get right into it. Just so you're aware, for anyone who might need it, we do have closed captioning available on this video, and the way to access that is on the screen that you're watching me on right now. If you just hover your mouse over it, you'll see down at the bottom of the screen on the black line, it says CC. And if you click on that button, closed captioning is enabled for those who may need it or want it. So feel free to use that at your leisure. Now I want to dive right in and just get us started with this awesome event that we have here today. We have Dave Logan with his new book, If These Walls Could Talk, Denver Broncos. If you a little bit about Dave Logan, he's been the voice of the Denver Broncos since 1990, beginning as a color analyst before shifting to play-by-play. Prior to his career in radio, he played 9 NFL seasons, including for the Broncos in 1984. In addition to being a professional football player, broadcaster, and football coach at Cherry Creek High School, Dave now adds writer to his impressive resume with the release of this book, If These Walls Could Talk, Denver Broncos. And it's my honor to welcome Dave, and we're going to have him turn on his video and microphone now so he can join me. Getting there. There he is. Hello. Oh, you're still muted. Let's try one more time.
There How about now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Very good. Very good.
How are you?
I'm doing well. You and I talked briefly before you came on, and I literally just walked in straight off the practice field. Thus, my gear. I'm probably underdressed. I've never done one of these events, but I apologize for that.
That's okay. Doing virtual events is totally fine. I've got my own hoodie on. We're comfortable. We're at home. We're getting a sneak peek into your home, which is something that's really cool for author events. I've met so many authors' pets. I can't even tell you, which they don't normally get to take on tour, but we get cats walking along the desks.
Right.
So.
I've got a couple of dogs, but my office door is shut, so you will not see either dog traipse through.
Sounds like a good plan. That we've seen lots of different animals on here, and it's okay that we keep them outside for now. But I want to talk to you a little bit about this book. Congratulations, by the way. Writing a book is a huge achievement. So how was it? Like, I know that sounds silly, but like, how was it transitioning in your career from this amazing football, I don't know, legend? Really sounds, I don't mean to sound lame, but it's true. We know who you are, being the voice of the Denver Broncos, into being a writer.
Well, you know what? It was really interesting. The process was a very interesting one. Frankly, I never ever thought that I would write a book. I've been approached before about writing like some sort of biography. And I even though I'm in an industry that you have to be able to communicate with people, people see you, whether TV or radio or coaching or whatever. Most of my really close friends would know that I'm an intensely private person. So this whole process was illuminating for me. And I think the thing that interested me the most, I mean, there were a handful of things. One, I wrote this book with Arnie Stapleton.
Oh,
And I
nice.
know Arnie very well. AP writers, cover the Broncos for forever. And I've got a comfort level with him. And also, this was a case where I would just be talking about my experience covering the Broncos, right? Some of the stories that I have seen and been part of and just enjoyed over this now being my 31st year of calling Broncos games.
That's amazing. What a huge feat. Thank you for that. Congratulations for 31 years.
Thank you.
And so you gave us a little bit of a hint about what this book's about. You said it was insider stories, but if you could give us a quick summary for those of us who might not know what If These Walls Could Talk is about.
Well, I think it's really sort of a look back, and we spent many hours talking into a recorder about some of my memories and then putting that to work. But I think, the Broncos have been such a great franchise over the years. Now, I know the last few years have been a real struggle, and I think they have been disappointing certainly disappointing to Broncos fans, disappointing to the franchise, disappointing to the players, the broadcasters, everybody. It's been a tough stretch. But prior to that, if you start with 2015 and go backwards, I think you could make the case that this franchise has been about as successful as any other NFL franchise in pro football history, starting with when Pat Bowlen took over in 1984, and even making a Super Bowl appearance prior to Pat's tenure as the owner of the Broncos. So the book is really sort of a look back, some good, some bad, and recounting some of the positive stories, recounting some of the big games, some of the big moments, recounting some of the things that happened sort of behind the scenes in stories that I could share and that Arnie could share. And really, I think it's a book that, I mean, if you're really a Broncos fan, my hope is that it's going to be an interesting and sort of upbeat read, right? It's not something that you're going to have to spend 10 hours reading, and it's supposed to be an easy read for you, a read that again will sort of take you behind the scenes and maybe take you in areas that you wouldn't otherwise have a chance to get to, and some stories that you might not have heard, and just sort of a recap of my 30 years covering the Broncos.
Well, and it's such an impressive 30 years, and there's really not many more people who could have such an extensive knowledge of this franchise. And, I'm technically a transplant. I was born in Florida, but I moved here when I was very, very little. And so I consider myself native, and Broncos are so ingrained in Denver culture, and how, it's interesting to see, and I'm curious about this from you, like, what do you think the Broncos means to this city? Because it still feels like people remember a time when Denver wasn't a sports city, but now it's kind of become that and transformed that. And so what do you think it means for the Broncos as a franchise to the city and to the people who have lived here for so long?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And it's one, having grown up here and been a football fan since I was a little kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having remembered games that I didn't get a chance to go to too many games. We didn't have the ability to do that, but the handful of games that I went to, and I was obviously a big Broncos fan because I grew up in Denver, right? Yeah. So back in the mid 60s, the franchise wasn't a very good football team,
right?
But they were still the team that I followed. They were still the team that every single Sunday, I would find a way to watch them on television. And so for me, and then having grown up in Denver, and then having gone to the University of Colorado, and then I spent a good number of years playing as a wide receiver for the Browns, and then being traded back to Denver and ending my career here in not such a glorious way. But for me, to then become a broadcaster calling Broncos games on a couple of levels, for an ex-player to be able to stay close to the game that I love so very much, and then for a broadcaster to be able to call games of the team that he grew up rooting for as a kid, right? I mean, I don't know. There are 32 NFL teams. I don't know. I don't know how many of their play-by-play guys actually grew up in that city and have that sort of background. But I really just considered myself to be so fortunate. And I think starting in 1990 and then taking over the play-by-play duties on road games in 96 and then full-time in 97, it just has been a really unbelievable ride for me. I've never missed a game in this, my 31st year. You feel an obligation to the people that are listening to your games, and you try to bring the games to them in an exciting way, an honest way. When the team plays poorly, you have to say they're not playing very well, because you lose your credibility if you don't.
Yeah.
But I'll get one story. When the Broncos beat the Packers in Super Bowl 32, that was the first year. And I know
we're joking about this just to give some people some insight. We were joking because my boyfriend, who I've loved and dated for 7 years now, is a diehard Packer fan, and so I was joking about how I was bragging to him, "Hey, guess what? I get to interview the voice of the Broncos." He's like, "Nah, it's not the voice of the Packers," and so we were just joking. And then Dave suggested that I bring up this
Super Bowl 32.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, and by the way, feel free to tell him tonight. It's been 7 years, so hello. Get moving on that, my friend. No, but it was such a cool event. The Broncos were a huge underdog, and then they played very well. They score, and they're going to kick off, and there are 2 minutes to go in the game, and we went to a timeout. And my color analyst, my partner at that time was Scott Hastings. He was already headed down to the field for the post-game show. Mm-hmm. And it struck me in the booth with 2 minutes to go, even though you're there, you're broadcasting the game, you're obviously calling an exciting game, but it hit me right then. Wow. They're 2 minutes away from actually winning a Super Bowl. And it took me back to when I was a kid in the 1960s, and the Broncos, they didn't win many games. They weren't even close to being a Super Bowl team. And all of the diehard Bronco fans, this franchise was founded in 1960, right, that had been diehard Bronco fans since then. And I'm thinking to myself, they are 2 minutes away from everybody in the Mile High City and, frankly, the Rocky Mountain region, of just losing their minds. It was a very, very emotional time. In fact, when they won, I had to turn my mic off momentarily just to sort of regather myself emotionally, because for a kid who grew up here, it was just a really cool moment.
I love hearing that, and how personal you make your stories as well, and how deeply rooted this franchise and this team and the sport is in your life. I'm gonna reveal my age here, but those 2 Super Bowls, those back-to-back ones, were my first real introduction into football. And my dad liked the Raiders, and we would go around saying "Stinky Raiders" to make fun of him. But it was such a monument to the city, and it was something that, like I said, it was even still in my life. And I'm curious how that kind of started for you. I can remember my moment of when I started watching football. Was it a family event? Was it something that a parent introduced to you, or a family member? How did you really become in love with this culture?
Yeah, I think I'm guessing I'm a couple of years older than you.
Yeah, so, like I said, I totally aged myself with that, but
yes, and I will not age myself with my answer. But you know what? When I grew up as a kid in Denver, ESPN, there was no ESPN, right? So the city of Denver basically got one game in the morning and usually the Broncos game in the afternoon. And the team that we got back in the mid '60s was always the Chicago Bears. So I could have told you, and still can, everything about like the '63 Chicago Bears that were the NFL champions, all the players. I don't have any idea why I've retained that in my head. My mom and dad reminded me of a story long ago. The first CU football game I went to was back in 1961. I was five years old, and they were struck by, and I don't have a true memory. I remember going to the game, right,
Mm-hmm.
and sitting on my parents' lap, but they were struck by how attentive I was as a child. I just, for some reason, I can't explain it completely, I just really gravitated towards the game of football. And I think, and I played at a very young age. I played a lot of sports, but I always loved football, thought it was still do, the best team game in the world. It requires so many moving pieces, and there's such a mental challenge. It's like, to me, it's like playing a game of chess,
Mm-hmm.
right? Except you're outside and the elements are there. And, I love basketball, but you play basketball inside. They don't play basketball in bad weather. I love baseball, always did. But it's a slower paced game. Football, to me, has such an attraction to it for just so many reasons. And so, that was my first memory, riding with my granddad in my granddad's car with my mom and dad to a CU game. The Buffs played the University of Kansas in 1961. They were down 19-0, and they came back to win the game 20-19. And so I just, even as a baby, a very small child, I can't explain it, but I just really gravitated towards football, and any game that was on TV, I would watch. I still do. I used to cut out pictures in the paper of football players and put them in a scrapbook. I didn't have any idea who the football players were,
That's okay.
but I just loved football.
So then, hearing these wonderful, endearing stories about how you grew up with this and how you made it your career, both as a player and as a broadcaster, you have this plethora of knowledge when it comes to football in general, and then specifically the Denver Broncos. How on God's good earth did you decide what stories to put in and what stories to take out in this book? What was that process like?
Well, again, Arnie and I sat down and spent countless hours sort of going over this thing and talking about some of the memories and stories that I've had. To be honest about it, there are a handful of things that I would never put in a book because I have too much respect for the game, and I have too much respect for the sanctity of a locker room and what goes on. This is not a book that I had any intention of making sort of a gotcha book, or one of those where you're going to tell things that would be viewed as not the right thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. So I would never write one of those books. There are some stories of things that, at least at the moment, were difficult, right? Difficult conversations or differences of opinion. Stories about interactions with players. Mostly good, some maybe not so good, but I just wanted to make certain that I brought a sense of flavor to the book that would take people that, again, otherwise would never have a chance to sort of relive those moments, to mm-hmm. read the book and say, wow, I mean, I can't believe, did that really happen? I'd never heard about that. Well, the reason you never heard about it is I never really talked about it on the air before, right? So that was what I wanted to do, without violating really what I consider to be the sanctity and an unwritten oath of former players, not to be that guy that writes a tell-all book. We've all read those books, mm-hmm. And I lose respect for athletes that once they leave that football family, or baseball or basketball, they feel a need, for whatever the reason, to basically out anybody and everybody and talk about anything that went on in that locker room that they know they shouldn't be talking about. And so I would never do that.
Well, and that's not that, the impression when I read this book was just kind of a love letter to the Broncos, and in the way that a true fan can be, you know what I mean? Somebody that can look at it from multiple sides, both critically and in praise of, and there's a really nice balance to the book. But at the same time, it's also kind of like a treat. You get some treats in there that, like you said, that some people never would have had before. An insider's look, with, like you said, not violating anybody's trust or policy or harming anybody. And so I want to go back to, your career as a broadcaster and as a player, and now as a coach as well. How did you find time to write this book? How did you balance it with, working with all your multiple hats that you've got on? And how did that look as you tried to transition into adding writer as a hat?
Yeah. You know what, Michaela, that's a good question. That was one of the areas of concern for me, because I wasn't gonna say yes to this unless I could, at least in my own mind, wrap my head around, like, okay, how's this going to work? How am I going to be able to do this? And so this project started well back in 2019, and it was done when times were convenient, right, for both of us, for both Arnie and myself.
Yeah.
It was not done during the 2019 football season. I think the football season for me is one that I love. I look forward to it every single year. Am I busy? I am. Do I get tired, towards the end of the season? I get a little tired. If you said, if you had to keep that pace, doing a talk show and doing the Broncos games, and most importantly, coaching a high school football team, could you do it for 12 months? I'm a competitive person, and I think if challenged, I might say, okay, you know what? Let's see if we can do it. But realistically, I don't think I would do it very long. So
that's fair.
Yeah, I think you have to to answer your question, I think you have to find an ability to be very intentional in time management in the fall. You have to find, I'm a high school football coach. Honestly, I take that job as seriously as I do being the play-by-play voice of the Broncos. Right. Being a talk show host. I think my obligation to my players is that I spend as much time as I possibly can and as much time as needed to be able to run that program and then put them in a position to where they have the best chance to succeed. And to me, it's a lot more than just X's and O's, although X's and O's are important, but they're, this is year 28 for me, I think, as a head high school coach. There are so many life lessons you can impart to young men that age. And I do think this, I've had a daughter, only a daughter. When I say only, I was blessed with a daughter. I didn't have a son, but I do think that, as a society, we go out of our way, and I understand why, and rightfully so, to make certain that our adolescent girls are treated the right way, and that they get opportunity, and that you love them up. And I don't think we do as good a job doing that with adolescent boys. I think if you go back to a time in the 60s when I was raised, there was more tough love. You were expected to. You couldn't show emotion. All the things that nowadays I think are so critical for kids, and even as critical for young boys as for young girls. So I think if you would talk to any of my players over the years, I think they would say, yeah, he was tough on us. He demanded a lot, but I certainly hope, and I feel like they would say, but I always knew he loved us, right? If I choose somebody during a practice, I guarantee you at the end of that practice, I'm walking off the practice field with my arm around them. I'm telling them why I said what I said. I'm just trying to help you get better, help you become the best player you can be. So all those things, to answer kind of in a roundabout way, in the fall season, it's a busy time. You have to be very, as I said, very intentional with your time management. And there's certain things, and like playing golf, and all those things go out the window. So I'll do that when I finally retire.
So what I'm hearing is that it wasn't necessarily as tough and you might be able to write another book. Would you do that if you were presented the opportunity?
I don't know. I've been approached.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it would depend on what the topic was. I've been approached over the years about writing, as I said, like an autobiography. I don't know that I would do that. Again, doing what I do, I'd say most people that hopefully have ever listened to me or seen me on TV or radio or whatever would have a good sense of the kind of person I am. But in that business, you have to really work hard to maintain and or preserve any sense of privacy.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to write a biography or an autobiography, I'd have to sit down and really think about that, because my sense is if it's going to be something worth the read, you're probably going to have to open a lot of windows to your life. And not that there's a lot there that I wouldn't be proud of, but it doesn't feel like it's in my DNA, to tell you the truth. Maybe I wouldn't say never, but I wouldn't say now right now.
Well, and if you had said never, we never would have gotten this book. So we've been blessed with this. So you never know what opportunities will come by in your life. And I think that's a really great transition into some of the audience questions that we have here. So just so you guys are aware, anybody that's watching, you're watching us on your YouTube screen right now. Just off to the right there's a place for you to type in your questions. If you have any questions for Dave here about the book, about his career, and we'll see what we can get to tonight. But I think a really great one to start off with is, could you share your funniest or most entertaining story from the book and give us a sneak peek? Can you think of one?
Oh, wow. My funniest or most entertaining story in the book. Well,
I would say it doesn't necessarily have to be in the book. If there's one you didn't put in there, maybe you could give us that sneak peek too. But that's up to you.
Oh, there's a couple, but I don't know if I better share those stories or not.
Again, keep the locker room, the sanctity of the locker room.
Yeah, right. Now that would be a really interesting book.
It's a great title, Sanctity of the Locker Room.
Right. I would say this: it was not all that interesting when it happened, as you and I were talking about Super Bowl 32, right? Yep. So it was the first year that I was the full-time play-by-play voice of the Broncos.
What a year!
And it was just a magical year, right? I mean, with everything that happened and coming off that loss the previous year to Jacksonville in the playoffs, that was so disappointing the way that season ended. The Broncos lose a couple of regular season games they shouldn't, and so they have to go on the road. They get a home playoff game, wild card game against the same Jacksonville team, beat them decisively, but then they have to go to Kansas City and play in a place that is really difficult to win, and against a team that had already beaten them at Arrowhead in the regular season. They win that game 14-10. They then go to Pittsburgh for the AFC Championship game. They'd been there in the regular season and had lost in the regular season to the Steelers, but they ultimately win that game. And so it's off to San Diego in Super Bowl 32. So we go, I fly out with the team. We go out the week before. The Broncos practice out there. We do the talk show out there. We're at a nice hotel. We're located doing the talk show in the lobby of the hotel. So every Friday, one of the responsibilities of the voice of the team is to do both the head coach's show and the quarterback show. Okay. That ultimately will run the pregame Sunday prior to the game.
Yeah.
So Mike Shanahan, obviously everybody knows he's the head coach, and Mike was I'd known Mike since '84. Mike had picked me up at the airport when I was traded to the Broncos from the Browns. And that was his first year as a coach in the NFL. It was 1984. And this guy walked up, extended his hand and said, "I'm Mike Shanahan." He said, "I'm the wide receiver coach for the Broncos." I'm thinking, well, this is my coach. I had no idea who he was because he came straight from college at that point. So now you fast forward 13 years later and he's the head coach and he's coaching the Super Bowl. So I do his show first. Mike would answer questions, but Mike was also very careful not to give out too pertinent of information right in a pregame show, and I completely understood that. But also would answer questions. So we get that done. Everything's fine. 2 hours later, we're scheduled to do the quarterback show, and it's John Elway. So we're doing the show. We have big, cloth walls that sequester us away from the rest. We're right in the lobby, right in the middle of the hotel. So we're doing the show, and in doing the show, you do 2 3-minute segments, right? You do 3 minutes and then take a break, and then come back and wrap it up and take another break, and then we're out. Of course, I'd done John's show the entire year, and had been a teammate briefly of John's back in 1984. So he and I have known each other a long time. So we're doing the show, and I am absolutely flabbergasted at how confident he was. Unlike anything that I'd ever heard in a pregame show the entire year.
You just knew.
he all but said, Dave, we're going to win. I mean, I'll guarantee we're going to win. But he was that confident, right?
Wow.
I mean, it was like, I'm sitting there as he's answering, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this is like off the chain good. This is going to be so good in the pregame show. So we wrap it up. I say, hey, thanks. Appreciate it, dude. Walks off. So I take my headphones off, and I'm like, and the producer's there and the engineer and all the people. And I'm like, God, was that like, did you hear that? I mean, that's unbelievable. And so the producer's fired up, and I look over, and the engineer by the name of Kenny Danon, who's still a very good friend of mine and was a great engineer. He's seated, and he's messing with the knob, and he's got his headphones on. And so I'm thinking, well, he couldn't hear me. And I nicknamed him the Wizard. I said, Wizard, did you hear that? He goes, I don't think we got it.
Oh,
and I'm like, I said, we didn't get, so it didn't really, I've been hitting the head a lot of times, so I'm a little bit
That's
dense
not
in that
funny
regard.
at the time.
I said, we didn't get what? He goes, I don't think we got the interview. I said, we didn't get all of it. He goes, I don't think we got any of it.
No.
I mean, I wanted, seriously, I can't even describe. I was thinking about, I mean, if I was a bird, I would have flown away. I'm thinking I have to get out of here.
Yeah.
And so that's a preview. So one of the stories in the book is about that scene and how we were able to make it good.
Yeah, make it work.
We had to make it work, and sort of how we made it work is, I think, will be an interesting part of the book.
That's awesome. Thank you for that sneak preview.
Oh, it was awful. It was awful.
That just sounds, oh gosh.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the next question so we don't have to relive that. So what has been the response of those who have read or previewed the book? Any words from current or former players?
So far, the response I've had is really positive.
Yeah, us too.
Yeah, it's been really good. I think that, again, I think guys, I mean, even current players, I think they know me well enough to know that I'm going to be honest. And if you play poorly or I disagree with your point, I'm going to say it, but I'm going to say it the right way, right? I don't have an agenda. I think there are in our media world today, just generally speaking, not even necessarily in Denver, but everywhere, and not necessarily even in the world of sports, but in news and everything else. You will see questions asked when an interview is conducted that mean to elicit some sort of response that really is not intended to benefit the audience, which is what the question should be asked for. But it's to elicit a response that then the person who asked the question can use that on their show, or can use that to benefit their particular brand. And I so dislike, I understand it, but I dislike that particular style of interviewing and broadcasting, right? It's not supposed to be about you. It's supposed to be about your audience. We are conduits between the players, in this case, and the fans. We're supposed to ask questions that the fans would like to hear the player or coach respond to.
Makes
So
sense to me.
yeah, right. The response has been good so far, and it's been nice to hear.
And it's going to only go up. That's the hope.
I hope so.
Right. So this is, I think, a really good one. And you just gave a kind of a nice piece of advice there. But do you have any advice for anyone wanting to pursue a career in broadcasting? I would think specifically sports broadcasting here, because that's what your background is in. But, you kind of gave a nice tidbit of your style and how direct you are, and, being a conduit or a bridge representative of the fans. But anything else you want to share?
Well, I would say this. I think it's been a great career. I've had so many blessings in my sports broadcasting career. When I think back, I started my broadcasting career started on a very, very small radio station. It was AM 1600. And so that's the absolute worst band position that you can possibly have. So it was a 5,000 watt station that went to 500 watts at dusk. And I was doing, when I first started, right? You literally had to be in the parking lot to hear the show, which was good and bad. It was bad because nobody really could hear me, but it was also good because nobody could really hear me. And so, I could learn a little bit about the craft without being thrown to the wolves in terms of being put on a bigger station that I simply was not ready to be on. So I would say this, the first game I ever broadcast, I did with Irv Brown, the late, great Irv Brown. He and I did a high school basketball game. He said, "Hey, you want to go do a high school basketball game on Friday?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Meet me." It was at Alameda High School. I met him there. I wore like a sport coat. I didn't have any idea. I went to where they were taking tickets. I said, "Is there a media gate?" And they looked at me like I had like 3 ears. They had no idea what a media gate. Well, I was used to professional sports, right? Absolutely. So anyway, I finally got in the game. Irv showed up. I said, where are we broadcasting from? He said, "Well, just go up and stand somewhere. Just find a seat. Something we're going to be sitting with the fans." So I said, "Is there a table?" He goes, "No, go get us a couple of programs." So I went and bought 2 programs. Anybody who's ever attended a high school basketball game knows that really the only thing in the program is the player's name and his year in school and his number, and that's it. And so we broadcast that game. That was the first play-by-play broadcast that I ever did. But the point of it is, for somebody looking to get into a career, never ever take any single job that is offered, right? Take them all. Start in a smaller market. Start where you can learn your craft. Reach out to people that you have heard that you like their style. Ask them for help. And most of them, I think most people will say absolutely. I think it's our responsibility in that regard to try to help young broadcasters that are just getting started. But don't ever look down your nose at a job as saying, that's not big enough for me, because that's how you get better. You want to improve, you want to get better. I did DU basketball on cable TV. I think there were probably 6 people that watched, and 2 of them were my parents. Yeah. So, but that's okay. You know what? I learned a lot, and I had 5 years of broadcasting radio and TV before I was hired at KOA back in 1990 to do the Broncos games.
Yeah, that's so great. And it's it's an old but true cliche of practice makes perfect. You
Absolutely.
have to sometimes pick up the little things in order to use them as building pieces to get you to where you want to go.
That's right.
That seems to be the same case here for you. I like this question. I think it's very funny. Between broadcasting, your time on the team and even now, do you think you'll have enough shareable stories for maybe a volume 2 of If He's Wanted? Which I thought, if you're going to write a second book, might as well just write volume 2.
Right. Yeah, probably so. I think that, we don't really in the book talk too much about the last 4 seasons, because they've been disappointing seasons. But there are some stories within those last 4 seasons that I think would be interesting if, in fact, we ever, as you said, do a volume 2. You know, I'd like to. I mean, I'm so blessed to do what I do, and as long as the good Lord allows me, I'd like to continue doing what I'm doing, honestly, for another 10 to 12 years, and then ride off into the sunset somewhere. But yeah, absolutely. I think there would be, if the book is well received, and if people enjoy the book and thought it was a good read, I would absolutely consider doing volume 2.
So the way to ensure to get a volume 2 is you guys have to buy volume 1, which you can do at tatteredcover.com. So you guys can go ahead and do that now. The link is below on the video screen that you're watching us on now, or you can go to tatteredcover.com and search If These Walls Could Talk Denver Broncos. Quick plug there before we go on. So I think this is actually a really nice question just about the process and your storytelling, of which you've shown us verbally and being on your experience with broadcasting, you're really natural at. But how in the book did you balance the tough love stories and the criticism with those positive uplifting ones that you mentioned?
Well, I think that I mean, the stories that I told in the book, I mean, I view this book really as sort of an open window to my time broadcasting the Broncos, right? Not necessarily an open window to all of my life's experiences, but but some of the stories. And so with that in mind, having never written a book, I just felt it necessary not to have you know, a book full of like everything is great and you know, all the stories were rosy, because you know what, they weren't. There's a handful, maybe minus a couple of stories in there that you know, at the time were difficult to go through. And it happened during the early part of my broadcasting career. And I think it was, you know, my reaction to at least a couple of stories that I share in that book. I think my reaction to what happened, I think my reaction was a combination of, there's a story in the book about, you know, I was cut by the Broncos in the middle of the season. That was a difficult time for me. It was the first time in my career that I'd ever been told that I wasn't good enough to be on a team. And so that was, you know, I've always been really prideful, and I've always been really competitive, like uber competitive. And so to hear that from Coach Reeves, I mean, that cut me right to the quick. And so,
understandable.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, my mom and dad were in town. I had been traded from the Broncos. I had friends, obviously lifelong friends, and then I get released in the middle of the season. So I fought for a long time of not being bitter, and also not, because I immediately started in the broadcasting business. And so I struggled with, like, okay, how do I, because this is Broncos town and I'm doing a sports talk show on a little station. We're going to be talking about the Broncos. So how do I, if I have a criticism of the team and or the coaching staff, how do I present that without being viewed as, oh, okay, you got released by the Broncos and that's why you're taking the stance that you're taking. So I decided at that point that I was going to be absolutely fair to the Broncos, that I would not criticize them, certainly not make it personal about Coach Reeves and myself. And so I went out of my way to walk that line. And so one of the stories in the book was when, I won't tell you the entire story, but I woke up one morning, this was after I had been hired at KOA to do the Broncos broadcast. I woke up one morning, was reading at the Rocky Mountain News, which is no longer in existence. And I read the sports page, and there's a big headline in the sports page that said Reeves, referring to the head coach of the Broncos, blast, and then in italics said experts. So I'm reading, having a cup of coffee, and I'm thinking, boy, he's pissed at somebody. So I'm reading the story, and as I read the story, he is quoted as the so-called experts to know everything, and he quotes Terry Bradshaw and me. And so that's where the competitive sort of part of me, and the part of me that had been really injured emotionally back when I was released, that part, which I thought I had done a good job kind of compartmentalizing that and putting that away. But when I read that, that door just sort of burst open. And so I already had a scheduled breakfast, a really early breakfast at Village Inn with Lee Larson. Right. I just remember driving, but I drove there and we met, and Lee already knew because he'd seen the paper. And I said, I want you to know that after this breakfast, I'm driving to Dove Valley and I'm going to talk. And he said, Dave, listen, Lee hired me. I have such great respect for him. And Lee has such a really cool way of viewing things and keeping things in perspective and getting things settled down. He's a master at that. And so he started to work that on me at the breakfast. And while I respected that, he said, I really don't want you to do that. I think you should reconsider. Would not be a good move. It's not a good move for the station, and all the things that absolutely I think were true and made sense. But you know what? I couldn't double negative here. I couldn't not go. Yeah. So I got in the car. I said, listen, I so appreciate you. I love working where I work. I have to go. I'm going. And so I won't tell you the whole story. I did get a speeding ticket driving there, which is a true story. And then the rest of the story is in the book, and it's and Dan and I are fine now. We're I had a lot of respect for Dan. He was one of the great coaches, obviously, in Broncos history. But that was just a moment where I felt like, listen, I have to stand up and make myself clear on what has happened and find out exactly what is he talking about, because I had no idea.
Well, no, and I think that shows the kind of character that you have, and and like you said before about being direct and being fair, and having that talk with somebody, and that takes a lot of courage. That shows a lot about who you are as a person. And I think this is a really great last question on that same note to end on, of what did you learn either about yourself, writing, or even just a fun fact while you were writing this book? What did this book teach you?
You know what it did? It allowed me to sort of slow down. Mm-hmm. We are in such a hurry these days about, everything, right? Everybody's working so hard. We're in the middle of a zombie apocalypse in 2020.
Oh no, it's like zombies can do it. What do you want? Zombies haven't arrived yet.
Yeah, well, listen, I think they're right around the corner.
Right,
the year could not be any more weird than it's been.
True.
But I think what this did was it allowed me to slow down. And again, people are working two jobs. They're raising kids. People are trying to carve out little periods of time where they can have dinner, and I don't like that. And so even though I'm part of it in terms of the pace that I keep. But I think writing the book allowed me to look back at 30 years and just completely appreciate how blessed I've been listen, I have been behind the mic for some really cool moments in Broncos history. There's no other way for me to look at that. I've broadcast 4 Super Bowls, 3 of which have been wins. As an ex-player, players don't normally become play-by-play guys. They don't get, whether they're not afforded the opportunity or it's just not their thing. But players usually are, for lack of a better word, pigeonholed into the color analyst role, into letting the broadcaster describe the play. And now you, as the former player, tell the audience what they need to know about that play. Why did that play happen? Describing the play. Right. And I think I was the first former player in the radio to be afforded that opportunity. And I took it, I took it. I thought I was so, when Lee told me, we want you to move over into the next seat, I mean, I was, I was nervous. I said, are you kidding? Really? But then I'm like, hey, listen, man, I don't want to flub this up. And I want to be really good at it. I want to find a way to bring my sort of style of broadcasting, whatever that is, to people. And then I want to be good at it. And since then, there have been 3 other former players that have turned into play-by-play guys, and the first 2 after me were wide receivers as well. So for some reason, the first 3 former NFL players to transition to play-by-play on their team's radio broadcasts were all wide receivers and all contemporaries of mine.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a great achievement to have for the rest of your life too, to be able to say that and then just have the 30 years on top of it, because you didn't just like do it for one season, and then you've created this legacy and maintained this role for yourself. And thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for sharing all of those stories in the book too, because you didn't have to do this. You could have said no, but it's such a treat for fans and for, locals and natives. And we just are so grateful for that. So thank you for this gift you've given us.
Thank you, McKaylee. I you know what, I hope people enjoy the book. It's really, again, it's been 30 years of, it's not work for me. It's stuff that I really enjoy. I really do. And, people say you get busy in it, but listen, you know what, there'd be countless people in line, if standing ready to take my job. And I know that. And so every single game I'm excited to do, and just blessed to have the opportunity.
Well, I'm sure that lots of people can hear that when they listen to you. And I've learned that certainly your passion for this sport and this franchise comes through. And so thank you again for that. And you guys really, you need to pick up this book. We have copies at Tattered Cover, If These Walls Could Talk, Denver Broncos by Dave Logan. And you guys can go to tatteredcover.com and look up that copy and put it in your cart, or you can come by the store, any of our 4 locations, and pick up a copy today. Dave, I just want to give you just a moment to either remind people who you are, where they can find you online, or any other last minute thoughts you want to share before we close out tonight.
Well, no, I mean, I wouldn't remind anybody who I am. I'll let you do that. But hey, listen, I enjoyed talking to you, and for how many people out there, which I obviously don't know and can't see. Appreciate you taking an hour out of your time to listen. And, my hope is that you're going to enjoy the book, an easy read.
Absolutely. And I hope you guys will as well. Once again, Dave Logan is here, the author of If These Walls Could Talk, Denver Broncos. And my name's McKaylee. I'm with Tattered Cover Bookstore. Maybe tonight you guys can, order from a local restaurant, continue to shop local, support independent bookstores. Your community needs it and your community appreciates it. So thank you guys so much. Dave, if you'll stay on for just a hot second after I cut the feed. And then thank you, everyone. Stay safe and happy reading.